Welcome back to Talking Stories. This is the show where we chat about news, culture, and stories that inspire change. My name is Raquel Russell. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. Make sure you grab your favorite drink, turn up the volume, and get ready to tune in. We have a great show for you. So, welcome back to Talking Stories. I am so glad that you are joining. I hope you have your favorite beverage ready. I am Raquel Russell, the host of this show. I'm a multimedia storyteller with a love for stories. It's made up who I am and the whole basis for this show. This is actually part 2 of a conversation that we started last week with my good friend Vivian, where we talked about a lot of things. We talked about her journey from med school aspirations to becoming a lawyer and what she looks forward to in the future. She's not letting anything tie her down. We talked about what's happening at Twitter. I mean, at the time of this recording, Twitter shenanigans are still ongoing, but we talked about that from a legal perspective. And then we also got to chat about some of the living stories that are inspiring her today as a human being and through every sphere of her life. And then part of one of my favorite conversations, we got to get into Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. And we started that conversation, but this episode today is to finish it. But before we get into that, I want to make sure if you're new, thank you for being here. If you're returning, thank you for being here. Please do one favor for me. Can you go on your platform where you're listening to this podcast or watching this podcast and leave a review? Let me know what you're enjoying about the show, what you'd like to see more of. I say this every week. My goal is that this place becomes home for you and that you feel like this is your place to be. So if it's home, I want to make sure that you choose the curtains that you like, you choose the beanbag that you like. Like, let's make sure that this is a place where you can feel welcome and feel able to thrive. We got some more exciting episodes coming up for you. So make sure that you share the show with a friend. Want to make sure that people who need to hear the stories that are being shared are hearing them and are encouraged. But before we get into part 2 of this episode, for this episode, I really want to make sure to make clear that this is a conversation from 2 women who had just seen Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And we shared all of our thoughts and talking about the excitement and the thrill that we had from it. And honestly, the immediate hours we had seen it the night before. And I know that there's been a lot of think pieces and thoughts and articles that have come out in recent days with the days now in between it first releasing. So I will say, just so you know, this is not a critiquing conversation necessarily. We do talk in a lot of, we praise a lot of the film and we talk about ways that we related to it as people, as individuals. If you're looking for more critical perspectives on the film, I'm going to link some favorite pieces below that I have seen. And if there's others that you enjoy, please, especially on YouTube, leave some links in the comments. There's an aspect to the conversation that I am seeing a lot of educational articles about, getting a lot of perspective, especially from the cast and from the different film critics who've watched the film, specifically about the indigenous perspective that was showcased in Wakanda Forever with the Talokans. And I will say that I don't think I necessarily had the language that I needed to describe what was happening in the movie, but I'm going to make sure to get you guys some pieces below in the show notes so that you can continue to see that further perspective. This movie had so many layers. There's so much we could talk on. But again, limited time, and I want to make sure you guys get into part 2 of this conversation with Vivian about Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. I hope you enjoy. As you said, like grief hits in different waves. And I think the beauty, if that's the right word to use, was that Ryan, as the director, allowed those moments to breathe. And it did not feel like we were rushed. I think overall, my impression of the movie, not to go too aerial-eyed view, but was that Ryan was able to tell, Ryan and the co-screenwriter, why am I blanking on his name? Joe Robert Cole, were able to tell the story with meaningful moments, still like fun and all that, but we were also able to breathe throughout the process of telling the story, which I appreciated. And I think that's part of why I say the word fulfilling, because we were able to experience each moment of these emotions with the characters. And except for the noisy seatmates that we had with the other in the theater, y'all, let me just break for a real quick moment. When you're in the theater, I totally understand like a question when you want to, you know, get clarification on something, or you're talking about something happening in the movie. But when you are carrying on a real life conversation with someone else about nothing that has to do with the film, why are you here? Wait till the movie's on Disney Plus. Wait till you can buy it on Blu-ray. I don't care. Watch it at home and talk about your life, but don't talk about your life while we're watching the film.
Thank you for saying it. Don't cover your face because you're absolutely right. Like it was horrible.
That was the
It
only
was
downside, I feel like, for the experience. I don't know about you.
yeah, yeah. That was because you could hear them, and you had it worse because you were right next to them. I kept hearing like this humming
Yeah.
and looking over, and they're just talking and totally wrapped up in each other. Do that outside, please, because
Please.
everybody else in the theater is here to watch and here to experience. And if you can't respect other moviegoers' experiences, like please, like don't bother. Why would you spend money on a ticket?
PSA for the movie going audience. Don't
Like,
spend money on a ticket and tick us off. Yeah. And I think
yeah.
the last thing I'll say on that is the interesting thing about I don't know if we explained it clearly, but there was a couple next to us while we were watching the film who just chatted throughout the whole movie. And one thing, maybe this is Namor coming out of me, but I was like, this is why we gatekeep these experiences. Like, y'all obviously don't get the weight of this movie experience. You should not be here. But that aside, so there's a couple of moments. Obviously, we talked about the panel coming up. And for me, it felt like this movie was representative of cultures in an expanded way, like
Mhm.
not like in a different way, but we brought in obviously we as we just talked about the homegoing, we got to see this Wakandan African culture, because I don't want to say like it's like a hodgepodge. Would that be
Yeah,
fair to say, V? Like
I
of
think
a
so.
lot of
Yeah.
cultures? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Fair. So we got to see that representation. Again, we got to see an African American voice come into play with the character Riri Williams, who we know from the title and everything that's been shared from comics is Ironheart, the
Mhm.
black woman Iron Man, or girl. She's no, she's a woman at this point. And then we got to see this expanded into Latinx, Latino heritage, where we see Namor and we get to
Mhm.
hear his story, and we get to see the experience of I'm you know what, I should have looked more about the right words to use, because we got to see the oppression that happened from Spanish colonizers in Mexico.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I don't know if you would say if they experience a sort of slavery or just being oppressed. Like I'll be quite frank, I need more of the language for it, but to see
Mhm.
that story being told was jaw dropping for me, and seeing like the way that they took protecting their resources in a different way than Wakandans. What was it like for you, V, when we saw the people from Talokon or Talokans? Sorry if I'm saying it wrong again,
Yeah.
but our introduction to them.
Oh, when they show up on the ship?
Yeah,
Oh my goodness. I was scared. I
yeah,
was genuinely scared in that entire scene because you can't see them. They have some sort of magical powers. Like the sirens,
yeah,
th- and it's dark
yeah.
and they're impossible to kill. One of them, as we later discovered was Namor, can fly. Like he can fly. You think it's over, and then he appears from the side of the ship, and I'm like, bro, how did you get here? I actually turned to you. I was like, seriously, like what is happening? And that was given what we learned later about the Talokan,
Talokon.
Talokan. I'm
I
gonna
thought they
look
were
it.
just going to use Atlantis, but I have to go and find out if there's a reason they can't say Atlantis. Like, I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
Atlantis as well. I don't know, but Talokon, yeah.
Talokan. Yeah. Um, that was based on what we learn about them later on in terms of Namor's story, the fact that they are in some ways a very like vulnerable people versus that very formidable, menacing, but also I understand
Right.
defensive introduction. I loved it. I was scared.
Yeah.
If that's what he wanted to make me feel,
Got that across.
then he like mission accomplished because I genuinely felt scared because I didn't know. I knew from the trailer that there was obviously going to be, and from the comics, we know there's interactions between Wakandans and the people of Atlantis, Talokan in this case. But all I could think was, how is Wakanda going to deal with these people?
Right.
They are underwater.
Yeah.
This man can fly.
Me
That's
too.
all I
What
kept
exactly
thinking.
this man
This
can
man, like, this man can swim, he can walk on land, and he can fly. You can't stop him in any element.
Right, right.
What are you gonna do? What's gonna happen?
He doesn't even have
Um,
kryptonite.
yeah, like how do you kill somebody like that?
Yeah.
So I thought that was an amazing introduction. I was scared the whole time. I knew nobody was going to survive on that ship, but I did wonder where the two scientists went, the ones that were submerged. We obviously see one of the suits later on, but
They're taking people out. And I
yeah.
for me, it was such a juxtaposition because right before that, we had seen this scene happen where Queen Ramonda had been brought into their version of the UN. I can't remember the Accord,
Mhm.
something where basically they were trying to come for her and say like, oh, when are you going to be sharing these resources like vibranium, like you all are just being so reclusive and you're not giving your resources. And they juxtapose it with this scene that happens with Adora Milaje saying like the French, yeah, it was the French who came in to try to break into one of their labs and take the vibranium. Haha, surprise, Adora was there and they just wrecked them, but they brought them all back in and they
Yeah,
surrendered in those headquarters. Queen Ramonda told them what was up. She said,
yeah,
don't come for us because you won't like it and we'll actually like mess you up. This
yeah,
is she didn't obviously say that. And it was such a beautiful performance by Angela Bassett. But then to come to this, where the Talokans said, y'all are dying today.
yeah. Take no prisoners. Take
No
no
prisoners.
prisoners.
And I think the thing about Black Panther as a whole, but specifically this movie, that
Mhm.
you kind of, and I think maybe more, especially for, well, I'll speak as someone from the diaspora, and like as you as well are in the diaspora,
Yeah.
but like you also have your direct connection to like the
Mhm.
motherland. Um, like this edge that you're kind of on of like, do we want to wipe these people out who want to come for resources that are not theirs? Um,
Mhm.
and specifically for the Wakandas is ours, theirs, or the Talokans who now we discover have vibranium as well.
Mhm.
Or do we just like try to make peace? Like it's this edge and this anger that I only got more familiar with. Like obviously you have like the feelings growing up and the experiences, but the language didn't come until I started learning more about Malcolm X and like that difference
Mhm.
between him and MLK, and like it's this edge that you're always on. And I don't know that Ryan and Joe ever set out to be like, you are wrong, like in terms of
Mhm.
like they're all wrong, they're evil, like kill the Talokans, but they kind of just present things to you. Like,
Yeah.
what did you think about that whole dynamic?
Yeah, so I love the point that you just raised about really like the Talokan represent Malcolm X and Wakandans are kind of like MLK in terms of their approach, their approach to colonizers, to colonialism, imperialism, and exploitation of natural resources in countries that, as we see with both Wakanda and the Talokan, have never been enslaved, um, right? The Talokan more so because, and I guess Wakanda to an extent, like it was a means of survival, right? Like, which is interesting. Wakanda exists on Earth,
Mhm.
but there's a shield, right? So you can't. just walk in and
Yeah.
be accepted. The Talokan also exist, but they're underwater. Um, I think it's just two different approaches to the same problem. And I think at some point you eventually need to call for violence. It's just when you choose to strike. For the Talokan, it's we're gonna keep quiet. We're gonna take you out, but you're not gonna know it's us. And that was the problem that I had with the Talokan in the movie was I understand what your issue is. I understand that you're doing this as a means of survival and preservation, but you're also doing it at the expense of another vulnerable group
That part.
being made the suspect, right? Or being put on the radar. And they're just minding their business. They
Yeah.
already told the UN Accord, was it I don't know if it was the Segovia.
They dropped so many names in the last 10 years. I don't even know anymore.
Yeah. So, Marvel UN, I'll call them Marvel UN. Um, she told them like, yeah, don't come for me unless I send for you. Like,
Yeah.
don't we're here, we're coexisting, we don't want no problems and you don't want no problems, so just leave us alone.
Yeah.
Like, we haven't done any, just leave us alone. And the Talokan are doing that in their own way, but every suspicion, it's the Wakandans took them out on the ship. Really? How did you come to that conclusion? Is there an element of racism there? I don't know. I'm not going to touch it, but it came to mind, right? Like, is there an element of racism there? Because Queen Ramonda came and told you
Yeah.
what it was. She was very clear. She did not stutter. Like, she told you what it was. Why then would she take any sort of action outside of Wakanda, too, for that matter?
Right.
They will only fight you when you enter their territory.
And it's been clear from the beginning. Like, this hasn't changed. They've stayed
They've stayed on task. You come to them, they will deal with you when you come to them. So why would they deviate from what they've always done? Right? So I was like, why exactly did you suspect Wakanda from the start? Like, why were they the only ones? Because they are the only ones have vibranium. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. And I thought it was also interesting because Wakanda didn't know about the Talokan.
No idea.
No, they had no idea.
Yeah.
Like, literally no idea.
Yeah. And that amazed me. Like, that whole, sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
No, go ahead. That was everything. Yeah.
That whole idea of, one, them not knowing that someone else had vibranium. It took a couple of story beats for them to be like, and accept that someone else had vibranium.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was that bit of conversation, which they didn't totally delve into, which honestly, I understand we didn't have time for, but like the questioning of all the stories that you tell yourself about why things exist. Like, Okoye had that moment where she's like, this is all the stuff that we thought had been passed down from us from Bast, and like, oh, that doesn't exist anymore. What do you mean? Like, and I think Marvel has kind of touched on that idea in films like even Thor, for example, and all of the mystical connections, but they've never really delved into that totally. But I appreciated that train of thought from her, because we see with Shuri that she does not believe in anything that cannot be explained by hardcore data.
Yes.
And I don't want to deviate too much away from what we were talking about here, but she has a conversation with her mom when her mom is saying like, oh, I felt, T'Challa with me, and, he encourages me to go on. And she turns to her and she's like, that's just a figment of your imagination that you created to push yourself forward. And I was like,
that's harsh. That's pretty cold.
Miss is about to go through it.
Yeah.
That was pretty early on too. I was like, Miss is about to go through it. But one last thought on that, and I want to make sure to respect your time, because I know that we've been talking for a pretty long time. But there was that element you talked about of potentially racism, and the thing that triggered that for me was when they talked about destabilizing Wakanda and potentially having a mission. I was like, oh, we're gonna play Congo, we're gonna play like Iraq, we're gonna play Philippines, or I love the way that everyone said Haiti. I think that might be my new way to say Haiti.
Yeah.
Haiti. But it it strikes, I think the whole film as a whole, Ryan is never afraid to put a spotlight on some of the real world elements that exist in terms of how these superpowers interact
Mhm.
with people that they deem to be less worthy of the resources that they have, even despite how powerful they might be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the last couple things that we're going to talk about, I'll map it out for us so that we can have a bit of a idea of where we're going, is talking about our favorite characters, the sisterhood that existed in the movie as a whole, but also then talking about Shuri's specific journey, especially the Killmonger. Sorry, I spoiled it. Oh well, the Killmonger ancestral plane moment to her really taking on the mantle of Black Panther. So
Mhm.
let's actually start with Shuri because I want to make sure that we get through that. Uh, Shuri goes on a unique journey, which we've already kind of started talking about in this film. And the moment that stood out to me throughout, like she really did seem to continue to just be a leader. Like obviously she's the daughter of Queen Ramonda before she died. And then when she died, like she had to really step into herself in a different way. And
Mhm.
I I was just devastated that she had to lose someone else. I honestly thought she was coming back. I honestly, at one
Me
point when I was
too.
hitting your knee, I
Mhm.
thought they were going to rewind at one point, and none of this actually happened. And it was going to be the one time I accepted that trope of this was all a dream.
Yeah.
How did that her losing her mom hit you?
Oh, I didn't realize it was happening. Like, I thought, no, no, no. She's gonna choke up the water and gasp for air, and she'll be back, right?
Right.
Because there's no way she could die.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And then she didn't come back, and I was like,
Oh,
I remember sitting there with my hand over my mouth, like, you can't be serious.
yeah.
She, you can't be serious. It's barely been a year since her brother died, and she's losing her mom. You can't be serious. And she wasn't there for her then, too. You can't be serious.
So
And
much to it. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, no, I was shocked. Like it felt a little bit like it did at the beginning of the movie where we were sort of thrust in, but we knew Chadwick was already gone.
Right.
So like we had already in a way dealt with our grief, but we're still dealing with it and going through that process in the movie. But then this was like, oh wow, we haven't even fully dealt with what we just saw, and this is happening.
And now there's more. And I think the layers with the fact that we just saw Namor come in and decimate
Yes.
that area of Wakanda, not obviously all of Wakanda, but to see how the Talokans just came in and said, "Oh, you thought you were going to play? You thought you were going to kill one of ours while you captured your princess and get away with it?" You are already dealing with the whiplash of seeing them wiping out people, then to come in and see her passing. And I think, as I said to you in the theater, I assumed that the reason that they killed Queen Ramonda was because they needed someone to be in the ancestral plane because you couldn't see Chadwick. Chadwick's
Mhm.
dead. None of us want a Mandalorian like creepy
Gosh.
3D prop showing up. None of us want that. I would
Mhm.
burn the film myself. So I assumed it was going to be her. But the
Mhm.
person who we were alluding to earlier that shows up is Killmonger.
Mhm.
And I thought this was very interesting for the last part of her like pre-owning Black Panther.
Mhm.
Um, what went through your mind when you saw him on screen?
I so it's funny. It's like Ryan Coogler threw like one, two, three. He just kept. He's like surprise, surprise again, surprise again. Um, so her mother's died. I'm still like reeling from like she's really Angela Bassett is not coming back on my screen for the rest of this movie.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to process that. And then the way they shoot the scene is you see the back of the chair, and Shuri starts to walk around to the left side of the chair, and you turn, and it's her cousin. And I was like, "Excuse me?" And two things came to my mind. One was how is he in the ancestral plane?
Mm.
Like, and then you remember, oh, he's actually a son of Wakanda.
Yeah.
But still, it was like, you, it's gonna sound so bad, like, but you wanted to destroy this place. How is it that you have ended up here in a place that's reserved for the most honorable among the ancestors? Why are you here? Who gave you a seat at this table? So that kind of went through my mind at first. And then second was, so he was the one who she visited of all the people. We didn't really see too many interactions between them in the
Yeah.
first movie.
Except
So
for
I
the
thought that was interesting. Like they fought each other. There
yeah.
was a scene between the two of them. It was her, I think Nakia, both of them fighting against Killmonger. But in terms of like the sort of dialogue that Chadwick and Killmonger had, or T'Challa and Killmonger had, that's not something that Shuri and Killmonger had. So I was kind of thrown for a loop, but it also kind of made sense.
Right. Yeah.
Um, like both of them identified as Wakandans, but both of them had also abandoned the traditions and
Mm.
the sort of fundamental cultural piece of Wakanda, right?
I
He
did not
wanted to
put that
use,
in.
yeah, like he wanted to use everything that they had for the purpose of destruction,
Yes.
right? She's out seeking for revenge. She doesn't want to admit it to herself, but she's already alluded to it throughout the movie that like she doesn't really believe in the old ways,
Yeah.
right? She doesn't. The heart shaped herb um serves a specific purpose. It's not. It doesn't. It's not shrouded in the rest of the beauty and the cultural context that like the priests and her mother would have had an opportunity to explain to her. It's here to give you strength and power so that you can
Right.
fight your enemies,
And protect.
right? Just as for Killmonger, vibranium wasn't this gift that was given to them from the gods and used to protect their land and used to help make them fruitful and productive. It's a resource that we can use to destroy other people. Like it doesn't serve the purpose that culturally they would have understood it to mean. Um, both of them really kind of either abandoned their cultures or didn't really buy into it, right? So like Killmonger was raised by his father up until his father was killed. So he did know some of the culture. Like I
Yeah.
remember in the movie they talk about some like his father showing him I can't remember what it was.
You taught him the language
He
as
taught him language and like showed him like stories, like some of the writing and everything. He has the, the signature in his bottom lip, right? So he knows enough. And in the same way, Shuri like has grown up with the traditions, but has a bent like her mom's telling her, I feel your brother with me. Nah, that's a figment of your
yeah.
imagination. Why are you burning your funeral clothes? That's very silly. That's dumb, mom. Like all of that stuff, right? So they know enough about where they come from,
Yeah.
but they're abandoning the parts that may actually be the most beneficial to them.
Each
So maybe that's why he's the one that she saw,
she's
right?
I think what also continues to like give credence to this is like the fact that the ceremony that happened right before, as you kind of alluded to there,
Mhm.
with her becoming the Black Panther, was removed of everything. Like it was just very
Yeah.
simple. Like even Nakia tried to like bring some of that moment there, but it was only
And she
because
was like, skip it. She's like, skip it. Yeah.
exactly
It was maybe not sanitized is the right word. I don't think sanitized is the right word
stripped
I'm
down.
looking.
Maybe stripped down.
Stripped down. Yeah, very scientific.
Yes.
Like they've simplified something that carried a lot of meaning to a lab,
Mm.
right? Because even like typically they'd go to that one place. I don't. It was like a
Dark
cave or
wave.
something. The dark, yeah.
Yep.
You're covered with the sand or with the snow, whatever the case may be. All of that was removed, and you're in a lab with a 3D printer that's just produced the heart-shaped herb for you.
3D printer.
You've removed, like, skip all of the language that the
Yeah.
priest would have used and just give me the thing, and make sure you stay nearby because I don't know, we have an AED, like a defibrillator or something nearby in case you need to um bring me
It's
back to life,
brought back.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, stripped down is the right where it's been reduced to a scientific experiment.
Yeah.
But it carries so much more weight than that. Like before her lab, right? Their ancestors would have used the same heart-shaped herb and done their version of science, or really it is science, but it just doesn't look the way Shuri is used to conducting her experiments. So
And I
yeah.
think from there, science starts to break down in terms of how it can help Shuri. Because
Mhm,
after she goes to the ancestral plane, she comes back, she's angry, but then quickly we realize she does have the strength of the Black Panther. And
mhm,
she goes to help her people who have now evacuated to Jabari land. And once she's there, she has a quiet audience with M'Baku. And I
mhm.
remember there's a moment when she comes in the suit, people are cheering, but a couple of us all didn't feel right.
Yeah.
I know for me, like it was, she's not actually here with the same intention she needs to be.
Mhm,
She's not here for noble reasons, as Killmonger alluded to or straight out called out.
mhm,
She is here with a vendetta. She
mhm,
is angry, understandably.
mhm,
She's lost her brother. She's
mhm,
well, she lost her father years ago. I don't think we even know how old she was when she lost her father.
mhm,
Um, and now she's lost her mom, as she
mhm,
says, the last person who knew her.
mhm.
So it, I did not accept that moment of her being the Black Panther because the suit was one thing, but you knew in her heart, even with that heart-shaped herb,
Mhm.
things weren't right in Kansas.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I remember it was like to the back right corner, people started screaming and clapping, and then it sort of cascaded. If not for that group starting to yell, I don't think anybody in the theater would have clapped because I think the majority of us knew that it wasn't right. And
Yeah.
by right, I mean her heart wasn't right. She wasn't in the right like mind space for it, and her reasons for donning the suit and for taking on the mantle of Black Panther were not. They didn't need to be Chadwick's or T'Challa's reasons. I keep
Right,
going,
you're right, you're right. I
like,
said that.
yeah, they didn't need to be the exact same reason that T'Challa took the suit on. Like he was noble,
Yeah.
etc. But she's in a very dark place.
Yeah.
And when you give somebody that sort of power and ability, and they're not coming at this with a clear mind, and the only thing that's on their mind is revenge, they're going to go above and beyond and outside of their character,
Exactly.
right? Like we the way she goes about things, I'm not saying she's not smart because she is, but it's clear it's rash. Like it's not she hasn't studied her enemy. She hasn't fought. She spent time with this person. And I think that's the part that was the most frustrating for me to see her put the suit on and still go forward with her plan to annihilate the Talokan was you spent time with this man. You've seen his city. You've seen his people. You know that there are similarities to yours. They welcomed you.
Yeah.
They greeted you. They were kind to you. And yet you've put all of that aside. Yes, he threatened, we're not going to
Sure.
excuse any of that, but he could have killed you and he didn't.
Yeah.
You could have used some more diplomacy. You didn't need, I think this could have been resolved without her having to wear the suit.
Mhm.
Or if she did have to wear the suit, use the same approach that her mother used and that the Wakandan tradition had always been, which is don't come for us unless we send for you. And
Right.
if you do come, be prepared,
Right.
right? I don't think she knew enough to go in and make certain decisions, and thankfully she came out on top. But there
Mhm.
was a point where the role was reversed, and we were actually really worried that the Wakandans were not going to make it back home.
They looked like they were cornered little fish and the sharks were around them. I
And
honestly
in the water, and in the water, by the way.
climbing up at the stair. I was like, y'all are finished. And honestly, like, and we don't have time to get because there's so many fights, so many things that we could get into. But before we get into the favorite characters, I just want to make sure we touch on that moment when she does like embody and own this role
Mhm.
of being the Black Panther. And that was after an epic but but like I don't think I've seen that brutal of a Marvel fight in a very
In
long
a long time. A long
time.
time.
The wings off his feet.
A long time. We haven't seen that since like the Avengers franchise started. Like before Avengers was when, because even Avengers at the beginning of the franchise, like it was still a little bit dark, but
Yeah,
all Marvel movies before that were dark
yeah,
AF. We have
yeah.
not seen this in a long time.
I was very nervous. Like
Yeah.
honestly, like especially with the time that was left, I thought there could be a world where she like damaged him further. Like
Yeah.
obviously she burned him, obviously she took his leaves off, not his leaves, his wings.
Mhm.
But she could have done more damage. And then when that moment came, and quite frankly, if you correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that quote that Queen Ramonda said happened in Black Panther 2. I thought it was from Black Panther 1, where she says, show them who you are.
Was she in the ancestral plane though?
She wasn't the ancestral plane, but she said that line, show them who you
Who
are.
you are. Yeah, in the first one.
It was the first one, right?
Yeah, and she said it to, I think she said it to T'Challa.
Like it instantly just
Yeah,
the vines were connected,
yeah.
where it felt earned. Like it didn't feel, because sometimes I don't know about you, but sometimes in these moments where it's like they have the fight, they realize that they need to do that in a different way. Like
Mhm.
it seems rushed and it seems like we just have to fix this so that the person comes out clean and we can root for them and they're still a hero.
Mhm.
This felt very real in that, again, there's that connecting line of her saying, show them who you are, like show them who
Mhm.
you actually are, but
Mhm.
also the diplomacy aspect comes in, the one that you were looking for of like yield and like the alliance that's going to form, which obviously we see later might become problematic.
Problematic.
But I was very satisfied with that
Mhm.
conclusion, and I felt like she really inhabited her version of the Black
Mhm.
Panther at that
Yeah.
point. I was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I like how they did that sort of montage of a side by side, if you will. Like, but it wasn't a side by side. It was like um Namor's memory, Shuri's memory,
Yes.
right? Even going to like the people, right? Like the people that Shuri saw in Talokan and the people of Wakanda that we saw, like the little kids, right? The mothers,
Shot
their
for shot.
relationship with the mothers, right? All of that was, I think it really helped ground Shuri. If that was the intention to show like what she perceived from Namor's life versus her own life and her own people's lives, it's we are both at risk of being colonized here. Like I think all of that helped her to see we actually have a lot more in common, and it is in our interest to
Work
um,
together.
work together and form an alliance. Um, and it's not necessarily on your terms. I like the fact that this alliance was not formed on Namor's terms.
Yes.
This alliance was formed on Shuri's terms. She had to fight it. I think that whole battle showed how truly dangerous she could be.
Yes.
And if only there was a way for the rest of the world, like in this fictional universe, to see that and help them to understand, do not come for these people because you really have no idea what you're up against. Um, because she honestly could have killed him. She was like
Right there.
ended
Yeah.
right there. And so for her to come into that moment and, like you said, show him and show everyone who she really is, um, it was a lot of restraint
Yeah.
on her part, especially since you could tell she was still very angry. But that's not something you can take out on this person. It's something that she would need to process for herself. So, yeah.
I love that. Right. Okay. So yeah, that moment was incredible. And like again, seeing her, as you said, she could have killed him and she didn't. And I'm glad that we have this heroine that I can actually look forward to. And like I feel invested at it, like
Mm-hmm.
invested in her story. And I only want the good things for her, and I want someone to continue to handle her story with care. I wonder if Ryan has it in him to do another Black Panther. I know this experience, from the interviews that I've seen, has been very weighty on him. But honestly, he's the only person I kind of trust to bring her character to life in another story. Like, I'd be a little nervous about anyone else touching her character, to be honest.
I agree. Yeah. He has a certain touch. Um, and just is very thoughtful, was very thoughtful with this movie. So yeah, no, I
Yeah.
agree.
Well, okay, so a lot of things happen. Obviously, y'all, we can't cover everything because this film, I'm sure, is going to have 100 think pieces behind it. But the one that I do want to get into before we start to transition out of here a bit is the after credits. There is one after credits, and then following that is a title card that says the Black Panther will return, just in case you were thinking that you missed something. You didn't. But this is honestly, again, back to that word fulfilling, and this is where my second word, optimistic, came in.
Mhm.
This after credits brought me so much joy, but in a way that I've also have to check. One, just to bring everybody on the same page, we see Shuri coming to Haiti. She gets off a car and she meets Nakia at the front door of another place where she's teaching. Actually, I assume it's the same. Yeah, no, it is the same place where
Yeah.
she's teaching students before. Nakia says, "Oh, we're almost ready." And she's like, "I want to do this on my own." Shuri goes to the fire pit to burn the funeral clothes finally, and she does that in solitude. What as that's burning, before the after credits moment, the Rihanna song comes on. I finally understand how this song fits. I'm like, yes, okay, this is a good song. I ended up listening to it on repeat on my way home. But when that was done, Nakia sits down next to Shuri and says that she wants her to meet someone. And she introduces a little boy. What went through your head when you saw that little boy come out?
So when he came up, first I see Nakia coming with a little boy, and I'm like, okay, who's this child? And then he smiles, and I remember he's the little boy that earlier in the movie was with two little girls and ran up to Queen Ramonda and said, "Do you want to see the headmistress?" And she said yes. And then they took her to see Nakia. And then I said, "That's his son." And the tears started again because I'm like, oh my gosh, she got to see her grandchild before she died.
Yeah.
And then you and I were talking afterwards, and you brought up a really good point, Raquel, about um, how way early in the movie, when Queen Ramonda took Shuri and said, "Come with me, we're going somewhere," and they went by the water to burn their funeral clothes. Queen Ramonda made a comment to Shuri saying, "There's something I need to tell you about your brother." And then they were cut off because it turns out Namor was eavesdropping and
With
decided to show himself and flies out of the water and reveals himself. So they never go back to that moment. But you brought up a good point about maybe that's what the queen wanted to share with Shuri, was that she actually had a nephew. And this cute little boy with his dimples sits next to his aunt and starts cracking jokes like his dad would have done, and reveals that he knows about his identity. He knows who his father was. He's named after his father, and says it with such confidence and pride. And I felt hope in that moment.
Yeah.
Like, he knows himself.
Yeah.
He knows himself. And I was like, okay, they're gonna be okay. Shuri's gonna be all right. They're all gonna be all right.
Yeah.
That was that was something.
That was really something. Honestly, everything you say is what I experienced. I don't have too much new to add on to that. I think it just the one thing that struck me was that they named him T'Challa. Now that
Mhm.
could very well be comic book canon that T'Challa has a child and he names him T'Challa. But I
Mhm.
thought it was another kind of reminder of like where this legacy can go in terms of Shuri is still here. If people are that desperate for another T'Challa, there's a T'Challa. But the recasting like hopes and dreams of a lot of people, it's not, you know what, it's not necessary right now. It's really
Yeah.
not. If you need someone to have that name again, he's there. The Black Panther mantle, this movie has fully established how it is a mantle that can be passed on.
Mhm.
And again, it was the fulfillment that I experienced in it. So again, everybody, there's so much we could discuss in this film, but we honestly do not have the time. If you've made it to the end of this, you are already a champion, because I hope you're enjoying the conversation we've had. I'm enjoying the conversation that we've had. I want to just wrap us before we get into some rapid fire questions. Or sorry, no, this is going to be a rapid fire. Can you choose five? What's your top five list in terms of stunning performances from this film? They all were stunning, but what were your favorite ones?
Who? Um, my favorites. This is gonna sound corny, but Chadwick Boseman, even though he did not have a single speaking credit, um, I thought that whole montage at the beginning is what sent me. I was like, "Yep, just
Yeah.
I don't know what you want me to do, but here we are." So I'd say Chadwick Boseman, um, Letitia Wright as Shuri.
Am I saying it wrong? It's Letitia. Aish.
I don't. I just call her Letitia. I don't know if that's.
Yeah,
Um, I loved Danai Gurira.
that's my girl.
She, yeah. I loved Winston Duke.
You bald-headed demon.
You bald-headed demon. That was the best timing, and it was one after the other. And the way he just pointed that meat stick at her, you bald-headed demon. Sir, you've been waiting to use that line. I could tell. You've been waiting. You have been waiting.
Yeah.
I thought that was, and he was just himself. Like he's really come into the role.
Yeah.
And what I really liked about him was that he served as a mentor to Shuri, even when she didn't want to hear it. And we all have to have somebody like that, like who's willing to call you out, but also let you know, like, I'm here for you. I'm here to support you. And I really like how he did that, even though he called Okoye a bald headed demon and went around trying to, strut his stuff. I appreciated it, especially in those quiet, like they had a few quiet moments where it's clear he's not trying to be T'Challa to Shuri, but he's obviously trying to be a mentor and do it in a respectful way given the position that she's in and the role that she has. So I liked how he brought that role to life. And then how do you pronounce it? Is it Tenoch Huerta?
I think so. Honestly, that sounds, but we'll see. We'll have to watch more interviews. That will not be hard homework for me. But yes, let's go with that pronunciation.
Namor. Loved him so much. He looked good.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't have a thing for piercings, but
Yep.
those piercings were giving what they needed to give.
Yep. The hair.
Um,
The hair.
the hair, all of it. And honorable mention to Angela Bassett because she is forever our queen and deserves the flowers and all the flowers and just looks so regal. Like nobody else could ever play that role.
Your top five list is literally exactly mine. Mine's just in a different order,
Okay.
but that is my top five list as well, with the honorable mention of Chadwick. So, I mean, maybe I can save that as an after thing for the channel. I'll share mine, but I want to be again just so grateful for the time that you've given me to chat about this film. I'm really looking forward to seeing what's next now
Mhm.
for Black Panther, and how it interacts with everything that's being built up to the next big films, the names. I'm such a bad Marvel fan right now, but the names are escaping me for the next big tent pole films. But I'm looking forward to how it fits into that universe. And I think it will provide an emotional anchor in a way that some of these new ones aren't bringing. Like, I know you're looking forward to Ant-Man too. I think we've talked about this, but
Yeah. You're not. Yeah, I think it's more because of the work on like the term is escaping me.
Quantum physics.
Quantum physics, but also like everything to do with time.
Okay.
The
Fair.
timepiece, I think, because they alluded to it a lot in the first Ant-Man movie, and then we sort of went back into the Avengers, and we
Yeah.
had like the snap and the blip and everything. So I want to see how they try to tie all of that back in
Okay.
with this new Ant-Man movie. And I know we're moving into the next phase, so I don't know if they're just sort of, I don't know how it's going to fit in with the next phase, right? So I just want to see what they do with that.
Now you've
And
got me intrigued. I think I was
yeah.
too focused on Evangeline, Lily, whatever. Um,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm just like, yeah.
no, that's amazing. But V, can you just make sure people know, because you're an amazing human being, like where they can continue to stay in contact with you?
So the probably the fastest or the easiest way to get a hold of me, two ways. One is Instagram. Handle is at Mamevi, Maamevi, and it's the same on Twitter. Try to keep it consistent. So that's where you can find me, Instagram or Twitter.
Beautiful. I love that. And everyone, you know, the channel's here for Talking Stories. Make sure to follow us. Just Google Talking Stories with Raquel Russell. If you haven't already, please review the show, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. If you enjoyed, share it with a friend. Definitely want to continue to build this channel and make it a place where you feel home to some engaging and great conversations like this one. So this is Raquel signing out, and V, my special guest, signing out as well from Toronto. We're rooting for you all and wish you a great week. And we'll chat more Black Panther on IG, so make sure you follow both of us. Bye.